My sister said, "No party this year. Money's tight." I agreed. Then I saw her Facebook. DJ Lights, catered buffet, Champagne Tower. My son asked, "Wasn't there no party?" I snapped a picture of the envelope with their rent payment inside and sent, "Return to sender." 40 minutes later, my dad was calling me over and over. I wasn't expecting this year to be any different from the others. Normally, my sister Melissa hosted a huge holiday party. Her living room transformed with strings of lights, her kitchen counter bending under trays of food, music loud enough to hear from the driveway. People came from all over. Neighbors, co-workers, distant cousins who seemed to appear only when free alcohol was involved. It was chaotic, but it was tradition. So when she called me in early December, her voice oddly flat, and said there wouldn't be a party this year, I almost didn't believe her. But then she went on about how money was tighter than ever, how her hours at work had been slashed, and how the rent was late again. She sounded worn down. She even mentioned skipping gifts for her kids. I told her it didn't matter about the party. Family was what counted. But after we hung up, I couldn't stop thinking about her words. Melissa had made plenty of questionable money choices in the past, but the way she described things this time, it didn't sound like just poor planning. It sounded desperate. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the bills I had lined up for the month, knowing I had a small cushion in my savings. It wasn't meant for her, but guilt got the better of me. I told myself she'd done favors for me over the years, that this was just me returning the kindness. The next morning, I withdrew the cash, put it in an envelope, and drove it straight to her apartment. She answered the door in sweatpants, hair in a messy bun, and when I handed her the envelope, she froze for a second before hugging me. She said I had no idea how much stress I'd just lifted from her shoulders. I told her to just take care of her bills and not worry about paying me back right away. I left feeling like I'd done the right thing, even if it meant tightening my own budget for the next month. For a while, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. She texted me a couple of times asking about my son, wishing me a Merry Christmas. I assumed she was spending the holidays quietly like she'd said. Then, a few days after Christmas, I was sitting on the couch, my son building Lego towers beside me, when I started scrolling through Facebook. That's when I saw it. Melissa had posted an album titled Best Night Ever. The first photo stopped me cold. A wall of flashing DJ lights, a champagne tower that must have cost a fortune, tables overflowing with catered food. In the background, people were laughing, dancing, holding drinks. Everyone was dressed like they were at some upscale New Year's Eve gala. I clicked through the photos in disbelief. Melissa in a glittery dress, posing with friends in front of a decorated backdrop. A hired photographer's watermark in the corner. Shots of people eating from a buffet that looked like it belonged at a wedding. There were at least 50 guests, maybe more. And there I sat, remembering her saying she couldn't even afford to buy her kids gifts. I sat there, my thumb frozen over the screen, scrolling through photo after photo. The date on the album said December 24th. Christmas Eve. The exact night she told me she'd be at home with the kids, making popcorn and watching movies because she couldn't afford to do anything else. And here she was in a glittery dress, holding a champagne flute in one hand, her other arm draped around a man I didn't recognize. Behind her, colored lights flashed across the walls like a nightclub. In another photo, she was leaning over a buffet that looked like it belonged at a five-star hotel. I couldn't make sense of it. At first I told myself maybe she'd been invited to someone else's party. But then I saw the background in one of the photos, her own apartment. Same furniture, same wall art. Only this time, the couch had been pushed against the wall to make space for what looked like a rented dance floor. I felt my stomach twist. While I was still staring at the photos, my son wandered over, holding a Lego piece in one hand. He looked at the screen, tilted his head, and asked, "Wasn't there no holiday this year?" He sounded more confused than anything else. I didn't answer him right away. That one little question had knocked the last bit of doubt out of my mind. She hadn't just lied to me, she had built the whole thing up, making me feel like I had to swoop in and save her. And I had. I drained over $1,000 from my savings, telling myself I was keeping her from losing her home, when in reality she was using that money to clear her bills so she could blow the rest on a champagne tower and a hired DJ. I got up, walked to the corner of the living room where my bag was, and pulled out a thick envelope. She had handed it to me just the day before, saying it was her rent for January. She wanted me to drop it at her landlord's office since it was on my side of town. I had planned to do it that afternoon. Instead, I laid the envelope flat on my desk, took out my phone, and snapped a picture of it. Her name and address were written neatly across the front. I attached the photo to a message, typed out 2 words, and hit send. Return to sender. I set the envelope back down, feeling a strange mix of calm and anger. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't ranting. I was just done. For the first time in years, I wasn't jumping to fix her mess. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from her. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't reply. 15 minutes after that, another text. Caitlin, don't do this right now. So I said nothing. By the half-hour mark, my phone lit up with a call from my dad. I let it go to voicemail. Then another. And another. By the time the fifth call came in, I knew she'd run straight to him. My dad wasn't someone who called repeatedly unless something was urgent, but the speed of it told me she'd already spun him a version of the story where she was the victim. On the sixth call, I answered. When I finally answered my dad's sixth call, he didn't waste a second on small talk. He asked what was going on between me and Melissa, his voice low but clipped, the way it got when he was already knee-deep in someone else's mess. I told him everything. How Melissa had called me earlier in the month saying she couldn't afford rent, how she'd painted a picture of being on the verge of eviction, how she made it sound like Christmas was basically cancelled for her kids. I told him how I'd pulled more than $1,000 from my own savings to bail her out, thinking I was keeping a roof over her head. And then days later, I opened Facebook and found a full-blown event documented. DJ, flashing lights, champagne tower, hired photographer, catered buffet, and at least 50 people crammed into her apartment. I could hear him breathing on the other end, but he didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was a pause, and then he said quietly that he believed me. He admitted Melissa had a pattern, not just with me but with other people, of stretching the truth when she needed something and making it sound worse than it was. It threw me off. My dad almost never took sides, especially not against her. Usually he was the family's damage control guy, smoothing things over so everyone stayed on speaking terms. But this time he actually said she'd gone too far. Then he asked me to take the rent payment to her landlord anyway. He said no matter what else had happened, making sure she had housing was the priority. I told him I wasn't doing it. If Melissa wanted her rent delivered, she could get in her car and drive it there herself. I wasn't going to run her errands after she lied to me. That's when my mom started calling. Her first words weren't questions, they were accusations. She told me I was overreacting, that I'd humiliated my sister by making a scene over something that wasn't a big deal. She said the party wasn't really hers, that friends had chipped in and paid for most of it, and that I was making it sound worse than it was. I reminded her I'd seen the photos. I'd seen the champagne tower and the DJ booth and the expensive catering. She tried to dismiss it as Melissa letting off steam after a stressful year. By the afternoon, my phone was a constant stream of incoming messages. Melissa switched between defensive rants and guilt trips. One text saying I didn't understand, the next saying I'd ruined her reputation with the family. My mom piled on with reminders about how family is supposed to stick together. My dad kept telling me to just drop off the rent so it would be over with. But something in me had snapped. I realized that every single time she pulled something like this in the past, I'd caved. I told myself keeping the peace was worth it. And here we were again, her throwing a party while I stressed about how to cover my own bills after bailing her out. So I stood my ground. I told my dad the envelope was staying with me until Melissa came to get it herself. If she wanted her rent paid, she could handle it like an adult. The next morning, the calls slowed down, but the shift in tone was obvious. The next morning was strangely quiet. No buzzing phone on the nightstand, no voicemail alerts, no barrage of texts telling me I was cold-hearted. I drank my coffee in complete silence, wondering if they'd finally decided to leave me alone. By noon, I'd almost convinced myself the whole thing had blown over. Then there was a knock at the door. Not the quick, impatient kind, but two slow knocks and a pause, the sort that make you hesitate before answering. When I opened it, Melissa was standing there. No glittery party dress this time, no perfect makeup. She looked like she just crawled out of bed, sweatshirt, messy bun, pale face. She didn't greet me, didn't ask if she could come in. She just said she was here for the envelope. I told her I didn't have it anymore. She frowned like she thought I was messing with her. I explained that after the endless calls from everyone, I'd decided I wasn't going to be the middleman anymore. I'd mailed it back to her address last night, certified, signature required. I even kept the tracking slip in my wallet. Her face went blank. Then she started muttering that I'd made things harder than they needed to be. I said no, she'd made things harder when she lied to me and used my money to fund a party she bragged about online. That's when she did something I didn't see coming. Instead of defending herself, she pulled out her phone and started scrolling, her thumb moving fast. Then she held the screen toward me and I froze. It was a screenshot of a group chat between her, my mom, and a few of her friends. The messages were from 2 weeks earlier, the day after I'd given her the rent money. One of her friends had asked if she was really skipping the party this year, and she'd replied, "Nope. Caitlin's paying my rent this month so we can go all out." Then came a string of laughing emojis. My mom had chimed in with, "She won't even find out. She never checks Facebook." It wasn't just the words. It was the casual tone, the way they were talking about me like I was some gullible idiot who existed solely to clean up their messes. I could feel my pulse in my ears. I handed her phone back without saying anything at first. Then I told her the next time she needed help she could show that group chat to her little audience and see which one of them wanted to step up. She tried to say it was just a joke, that they weren't serious, but it was too late. Whatever part of me still felt guilty about not helping her was gone. I told her I was done, completely done, and shut the door before she could answer. I thought that was it. I thought I'd just cut her off and she'd eventually get bored of trying to drag me back in. But 2 days later I walked into work and found my dad sitting in the break room waiting for me, which made no sense because my dad had never once shown up at my job. And the look on his face told me I was about to find out why. When I walked into the break room and saw my dad sitting alone at the corner table, it felt wrong immediately. He's not the type to drop by for a surprise visit, and definitely not in the middle of my workday. He was just sitting there with his hands clasped, staring at the table like he'd been running the same thought through his head for hours. The second I stepped in, he stood and said we needed to talk somewhere private. No small talk, no smile. I followed him out into the parking lot, my chest tight, already bracing for whatever this was going to be. We stopped next to his truck, far enough from the building that no one could overhear. He turned to face me, and before I could even say anything, he said Melissa had told him I'd sent her rent money back out of spite, and now she was on the verge of being evicted. I almost laughed at how upside down she'd twisted the story. But instead I laid everything out, from her tearful phone call about not being able to afford rent, to the Facebook photos of the party, to the group chat where she and my mom were joking about me paying her bills so she could go all out. I expected him to be furious at her, but instead his shoulders sagged like this wasn't news to him. And then he told me something I hadn't been prepared for. This wasn't the first time. Over the past few years, Melissa had done the same thing to other family members. Borrowing for rent, and then using the money for vacations, shopping sprees, parties. Some relatives had already cut her off completely. He said he'd warned her more than once, but she always had a new excuse and someone always gave in. When I asked why nobody had told me, he said they didn't want to cause a bigger rift in the family. That answer hit harder than I expected. They'd let me believe I was helping someone in genuine need, all while knowing she'd probably blow the money on something selfish. Then he hesitated before telling me the part that made my stomach drop. My mom had known about the party weeks before it happened. She'd even helped Melissa plan some of it. Decorations, food suggestions, inviting certain relatives. She had been in on it the entire time, even as I was pulling money from my savings to save Melissa from being evicted. Suddenly her fierce defense of Melissa made perfect sense. She wasn't just covering for her, she was complicit. I stood there in the parking lot, trying to wrap my head around the fact that two of the people I thought I could trust most in the family had played me. My dad said he didn't agree with what they'd done, but he wanted me to just let it go, so it wouldn't get uglier. I told him it already had. He looked like he wanted to say more but didn't. Instead he just sighed, climbed into his truck and drove off. I stood there for a minute before going back inside, and it hit me, I wasn't just done with Melissa. I was done letting my mom have any say in my loyalty or my wallet. And the next move I made would prove it. That night, after my son went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the certified mail receipt from the post office. According to the tracking, Melissa had signed for the envelope at 3:14 that afternoon. Her problem was officially back in her hands, exactly where it belonged. For the first time in weeks I felt steady. Not happy but steady. I took out my phone, opened the family group chat and typed out one final message. No explanations, no apologies, just facts. Going forward, I'm not lending money, delivering money, or handling bills for anyone in this family. If you need help, figure it out yourselves. Then I muted the thread. The reaction was immediate. My mom replied first, sending a flood of texts about how I was overreacting and making the whole family suffer over one mistake. She kept calling it a misunderstanding, as if I'd simply gotten the date of the party wrong or misheard Melissa's sob story about rent. Melissa chimed in next. Her first text said I was being dramatic, followed by a longer one about how she never meant to hurt me and that I should just let it go because it's not worth losing family over. Then came a jab that my holier-than-thou attitude was why people didn't come to me for fun. I didn't respond to either of them. The next morning I woke up to no new messages. That silence stretched into days. I stayed off Facebook completely. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of wondering if I was watching. By the end of the week, my cousin texted me out of the blue. She said Melissa had been calling around, asking for short-term loans to cover her rent and utilities. None of the same friends who helped fund the party had offered her a dime. Apparently, Melissa had even tried to guilt one of our uncles into helping, but he'd heard my version of events and told her no. It was petty, but I won't lie. There was a grim satisfaction in knowing she was finally out of lifelines. My mom, on the other hand, pivoted to pretending nothing had happened. She started calling just to check on her grandson, and would slip in small hints about how the holidays will be here before we know it. As if that would magically erase everything. I never took the bait. If she wanted a picture-perfect family gathering, she'd have to organize it without me. And my dad, he stayed quiet. He called a few times, asked how work was going, how my son was doing, but never once mentioned Melissa or the rent money again. I think he knew that door was closed. Strange how quickly a boundary changes everything. I used to think family loyalty meant swallowing my anger, letting things slide, and being the one to smooth it over. Now I see it for what it was, letting people treat me like a backup plan. Melissa didn't just lose my money. She lost my trust, my time, and my willingness to be her safety net. And the truth is, those things were worth more than the envelope I sent back. I kept my distance from Melissa and my mom completely. No texts, no casual check-ins, nothing. My dad and I still talked, but only about neutral things. My son, work, the weather. He never once tried to bridge the gap, and honestly I was grateful for that. Then out of nowhere I got an email from Melissa. Not a text, not a call, an email. The subject line was just, "Please read." It was a long, rambling apology about how she didn't realize how much the party would hurt me, how she'd been caught up in the moment, and how she wanted us to start fresh. She even threw in that she was finally getting her finances together, and trying to change. But halfway through the tone shifted. She mentioned her landlord had raised her rent, that things were tight again, and that she hated to ask, but could I help her out with just this 1 month? I stared at the screen for a long time before typing my reply. It was only 3 sentences. "I'm glad you're trying to change. I hope you figure it out. But my answer is no." I hit send, closed the laptop, and felt a strange sense of relief. The lesson in all of this was ugly but necessary. Sometimes the people you think you're helping are just learning how far they can push you. And once you take away their safety net, they either figure out how to stand on their own, or they fall. Melissa had already made her choice. This time I was letting her deal with the landing.